Hey, party people, it's Cliff. Yesterday I was I was walking to lunch. And there were these, I guess it must have been a couple, they were walking together. And I stop at the crosswalk and waiting for the light to turn green so I could cross. And they just went ahead and crossed the street while the light was red. And I'm thinking to myself, I would never work with those people. And no malice, no ill content, no, they're allowed to do what they want. They can walk across the street. They could walk across the street when the thing is red. Some folks call it jaywalking. I call it you got to get to your destination and do your thing. But I'd never work with them. And it's one of those things where, if your character is not abiding by at least some rules, the smallest of rules, then if you're gonna be responsible for big things, then you're not gonna follow those big rules. Of course, there is that argument of saying like, well, current administration, they don't give a shit about rules now, do they? But at the same time, it just shows your character. It shows your intent. And it shows that, that let's say that I wanted to make a business deal with them. Well, how can I trust those people, right? If they're willing to be nonchalant and cross the street like that, yeah, you could argue that, oh, it's just that one time. Oh, they had to get to somewhere. They had to, do their thing. And I don't think it was not in that time, because there's no like business, and they were very, very casual walking across the street. Cars were also braking, so they weren't getting hit. And that happens all the time in LA. You'll have a person just wandering the street, and everybody who's driving the car knows that person's like their life. They got some shit going on in their life. And it just shows that character. And it's like, if you try to do a business deal with them, or if you say, hey, I need you to do this, this, and this, I gave you, $5,000, $10,000 to do it, you can't trust them. Like, their integrity is shot. If they can't wait and say at least follow something, if they break the most like very basic of rules, then that just harms their character and harms their integrity. And of course, then there's always the argument of like, well, rules are made to be broken. If you follow all the rules, then you get nowhere ahead in life. I'm like, well, all right. But the rules are there to act as a guide and to act as the system that is already put in place. And yeah, I mean, look, would you watch a sports game if there were no rules? Would you watch, NHL playoffs are happening right now. It's like, would you watch a sports game if like your team scores a goal and then they say like, oh, no goal, and like, why is it a no goal? Just because I felt like it. Would you watch it then? No, of course you wouldn't. So the rules are there, and folks say like, oh, rules are there to be broken, and that's sort of the mentality when you have like more money, is that you just do the things, breaks, or at least that's the tech industry. You do things, you break stuff, and then when you break stuff, that's when the regulators come in after the fact and, regulate everything. They say, oh, you can't do that. We need to have a set of rules, or else you're getting people taken advantage of. I don't know. I thought that was interesting. And a poor car onto the right of me we just drove by doesn't have a catalytic converter in it. Must have gotten stolen. That was another thing too, is like my dad had a truck, went to was going to the hockey game in Dallas, and parked a truck at the subway station, or no, the DART station, and somebody sawed off his catalytic converter, and like, I mean, those guys didn't follow any of the rules, right? I guess that's the risk, right? Like, let's take, for instance, like financial risk. You go to Vegas, you go to the roulette table, you put $100 on black or $100 on white. I actually saw this one time, like when I was a kid. The guy put, I think it was $300. He put $300, back in like 2000, back in like the 90s, or the early 2000s, which is like $300. Oh my God, that's a lot. Not anymore. But he put $300 on red, $300 on black, and he won. He won $600. Or whatever the odds were at that time. He won. Everybody was like, "Oh, amazing! Congrats, you won." And then the next round, he put it on black. And he put all of his $600 on black, and everyone's just like, "Oh, he's a gambler, all right." And then he lost it. He lost it all because it appeared on red and not black. Now, in that little instance, it's a very high risk, 50-50. You either win or you lose. High risk, high reward. And the higher the risk of doing something fast, the more reward you get. Let's say you go and rob a bank. Well, very fast, You go in, get out 5 minutes, potentially steal millions of dollars, right? Well, there's high risk, high consequences, I should say. You steal the bank, they're going to chase you. They're going to look at you. They're going to do everything. But if you take your time and you invest your money into long-term, low-risk, stable, that's when the game changes. If you take $1,000 and invest it into a CD or a certified deposit at a bank with a 1% interest, which will give you nothing, well, a certified deposit, it'll get you 1% interest, and you'll 100%, you'll get it back. Same with money markets. I know all these silly financial things, but it just goes to show that, like those people who walked across the intersection while the light was red, I'm not quite sure how to connect this, but your integrity matters, and the type of character that you develop as a person is also going to lead to all the other decisions that you've led in life. Just like that one guy who put $300 down, won $600, could have walked away, doubled his money, no problem. But he put it back down, and that shows that guy's character. Like, to him, he wanted more. And I believe that at some point, when you say, "Hey, you know what, I have enough," that's when sort of everything changes. At least that's what I think. And I think it also changes into a personality where you're just relaxed. Like you're at peace. And I don't know, it's tough to say, because the internet and YouTube is full of very compartmentalized videos. Like, this kind of video wouldn't fit in any of those categories because it talks about a wide breadth of subjects, and everybody who watches YouTube wants to have a very specific set of subjects. They want you to talk about, like, oh, these are the 5 ways to do this. This is the 10 ways to do that. And it's like, that's not life. That is a small sliver of a reflection of a very small part of a nuanced, life that somebody has experienced for 2 hours of a day. And so, that's it. It's very simple. And a little bit of me, because when I was getting the Taco Bell, that's where I was just getting some breakfast, I saw probably 4 or 5 homeless people as I'm driving from my place all the way to Taco Bell. One guy on the street outside where my place is, one guy over at the Taco Bell. I went to lunch yesterday at a Jamba Juice or whatever it is, and I was like, I'm in there, I'm ordering, I'm on the phone, I hear this guy say, excuse me, and turn around, and he's like, hey, whatever, and I say, hey, I'm sorry, I don't carry cash. I don't I don't carry cash anymore. And it goes to show, like the last couple videos I did, it's like, if I try to help out everyone, which my heart goes out to, then, I'd be broke too. And that's the conundrum. How do you solve the homeless people? How do you solve the homeless crisis, right? It's like, well, all right, round them all up, put them in homes. Well, you can't do that because they have certain rights and freedoms. And if you round them up, that means you could round up anybody. All right. And the best thing to do is shoo them away. And they move from one place to another. Or at least that's how it works right now. But let's say you have a class or, like programs or education to teach them stuff and do that. I mean, I don't know. I think you fix the homeless crisis by offering universal free healthcare, across the states. I mean, I say that, but then I was down in Australia in Melbourne, really great city, really great people, really great friends, all of that. And there were still homeless people down there, but they have free healthcare. Granted it was less, and I only saw one lonely homeless guy, but even my friends were saying like it's getting worse. Then you could say like, all right, free universal healthcare, free universal basic income. Well, you're always going to have somebody like that guy in Vegas who's going to, throw away his $300 universal basic income on the gambling. And then they're going to be, woe is me. So in order to fix homeless crisis, it's a mentality, health crisis. And how do you change somebody's mind? Good luck, right? Like, people can't agree on two toppings of, on the same toppings of pizza, and you want to try to, fix the homeless. I think the way that you do it is you offer, slow things first, like, and it's got to be behavioral incentives, right? Like, hey, if you and I guess that's exactly how capitalism exists, right? It's like, let's say you offer, hey, you can get a free hot meal if you come in and help, with the dishes and clean the kitchen, as restaurants would go. And, well, then it goes to, all right, well, if you don't want to wash the dishes, like, do some work for me and I'll pay you money. Well, great. Now you just got into the employee space. So, I don't know. I don't think that there's enough debate on the homeless situation. But I don't think there's enough debate on the homeless situation, on what the problem actually is, which is a mental health crisis. And hey, and maybe that's where it starts. Maybe it starts with those like two people, crossing a crosswalk, ignoring the rules, for just a little bit. And then you're like, hey, nobody busted down the doors, no police, broke their way in. Kevin Smith had a good thing, and I think it was also the same thing with like the Elon Musk smoking weed on Joe Rogan. It's like, smoking weed is illegal in some states, but if you are a person that provides value to the rest of the world in some regard or fashion, even if you hate the guy, or dislike those people, then everyone like overlooks it. Everyone's just like, oh yeah, just let him smoke, whatever, tomorrow he'll wake up and do the thing. And Kevin Smith was like the same way. It's like, as long as you're like doing stuff and being valuable to society and being a person of integrity, which being a person of integrity is, following at least some rules, making at least some decisions, like following the law, then, breaking the law here and there is kind of like, stuff that isn't going to harm anyone else, and you're the one doing it, like, yeah, go for it. And maybe that's what that couple is, you know. Maybe they're, you know, in that world of being like, hey, you know what, walking across the street so we can get to our restaurant, like, and, you know, and take the risk of getting hit by a car. Maybe that's worth it to you. But but not me. I mean, I think at one point, I can't remember. No, I would remember that if I got hit by a car. No, that's I had a friend. That's what it was. I had a friend who, a golfing buddy, a long time ago, Stuart. I asked him what happened with his leg, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I got hit by a car, got mangled up." And probably since then, I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to cross the street. I'm going to give the thing that's bigger than me the right of way, you know, and not mess around with it. And that goes for everything. Well, it goes for transportation at least. But anyway, that's all I got. You know, like, yeah, follow the rules. And if you choose to break them, like, just know the consequences. That's it. Stay safe out there. Have a good one. Bye.